Rome was relentless, but their true power didn't lie only in their legions. It was in the devastating siege machines that crushed any city that stood in their way. Towering weapons, endless strategies, and fear that broke cities before a single wall fell. Imagine standing behind your city gates, knowing that beyond the horizon, an army was building colossal towers and machines that could reduce your walls to rubble. Rome didn't simply fight battles. They erased resistance with methodical precision. Their enemies didn't lose because of a single clash. They lost because Rome made them believe there was no escape. Today, we step into the world of ancient warfare and see how the Roman Empire turned engineering into a weapon. This is the terrifying truth of Roman siege warfare, where machines roared louder than armies, and fear struck long before the first stone ever hit the walls. For Rome, sieges weren't rare, they were essential. Conquest wasn't just about the battlefield. It was about breaking the cities that gave empires their power. Fortified cities were designed to resist entire armies, but Rome learned to starve them, bombard them, and psychologically crush their defenders until surrender felt like mercy. In Gaul, Greece, Judea, everywhere they marched, Rome used sieges not only to conquer, but to demonstrate absolute dominance. The message was clear. No wall was high enough, no gate was strong enough, and no people were unbreakable. Without mastering siege warfare, Rome could never have stretched from the sands of Africa to the forests of Germania. It wasn't just about winning wars. It was about controlling the world, one fortress at a time. The ballista was Rome's thunderbolt. Picture a crossbow so massive that it took teams of soldiers to operate it. Its bolts, tipped with iron, flew with such speed they could pierce shields, splinter wooden defenses, and even impale multiple men at once. The sound alone, the crack of twisted sinew unleashing its deadly power, was enough to terrify defenders. From hundreds of feet away, the ballista could rain precision death upon walls and soldiers alike. Its psychological impact was as deadly as its bolts. When a city heard the sharp twang of a ballista firing, it knew destruction was inevitable. For Rome, this wasn't just a weapon, it was a promise. Resist, and we will tear your world apart. Then came the onager, the wild donkey of Roman siege warfare, named for the violent kick it delivered with every shot. This was a catapult designed for terror. Massive stones, sometimes weighing hundreds of pounds, were hurled with such force that they shattered masonry like glass. Defenders didn't just see the destruction, they felt it. Every impact rattled the ground and sent shockwaves through the walls. The onager turned sieges into nightmares, bombarding cities day and night until even the strongest fortresses seemed fragile. To those trapped inside, it felt less like a battle and more like the slow, unstoppable collapse of their entire world. While the ballista and onager ripped cities apart, the scorpion hunted men. This was a smaller, deadlier weapon, a precision engine of death. With its long, taut arms and deadly bolts, the scorpion could pick off defenders on the walls from shocking distances. One by one, the bravest soldiers who dared show their heads were struck down. It was like an ancient sniper rifle, its accuracy devastating morale. For defenders, it created a chilling reality. Even standing behind your own walls wasn't safe. The scorpion didn't just kill, it reminded Rome's enemies that every movement was watched, every mistake punished with death. Siege towers were wooden giants, rolling fortresses on wheels, built taller than the very walls they sought to conquer. Packed with soldiers, archers, and sometimes even small artillery, these towers were the ultimate terror of a siege. As they creaked forward, defenders unleashed everything they had: arrows, fire, stones. Yet still, the towers advanced. From the top, Roman archers rained death down onto the battlements. At their base, shielded doors opened and unleashed the legionaries directly onto the enemy walls. For those inside a besieged city, the sight of one of these monstrous towers inching closer every day was pure despair. Resistance suddenly felt meaningless. The battering ram was brute force incarnate. mounted beneath a wooden shelter to protect the soldiers operating it. The ram swung back and forth until it struck with the force of a thunderclap. Each impact echoed like a death knell through the city's gates. Defenders poured boiling oil, hurled rocks, and set fires, but the Romans never stopped. They replaced burned wood, patched their machines, and swung again. The ram was the sound of inevitability, a steady, relentless pounding that told every trapped soul inside the walls that their time was running out. When walls wouldn't break, Rome went under them. Their engineers were as dangerous as their soldiers, and sapping was one of their most cunning tactics. They dug tunnels beneath enemy fortifications, supporting them with wooden beams. Once in place, they set the beams on fire, collapsing entire sections of the walls from below. Imagine standing guard one moment, only to hear the earth rumble as part of your defenses vanish in an instant. These subterranean assaults didn't just destroy stone, they destroyed hope. Even if defenders repelled the soldiers above ground, the unseen threat beneath their feet reminded them that Rome was relentless. There was no safe direction to turn. Above, ballista bolts tore the air. Ahead, towers approached. And below, the ground itself betrayed them. Tunnels made it clear Rome would not be denied entry. Rome's greatest weapon wasn't steel or stone. It was fear. A Roman siege was a living nightmare designed to break an enemy's spirit before their walls ever fell. They bombarded cities day and night with no pause for rest. The constant thunder of siege engines leaving defenders exhausted and terrified. Fires burned outside the walls as a reminder of the destruction to come. Roman war horns bellowed through the darkness, echoing across the battlements like the cries of doom. Prisoners were executed in plain view of their comrades, their deaths a grim warning of what awaited the city. To resist Rome was to live in constant dread, knowing that your enemy didn't simply want to defeat you. They wanted you broken long before the final blow came. By the time the walls fell, most cities had already surrendered in their hearts. Caesar's masterpiece at Alesia was not merely a siege. It was a trap from which there was no escape. Surrounded by a massive army of Gauls, most commanders would have retreated. Not Caesar. He built two walls, one facing inward to imprison the defenders, and another facing outward to block reinforcements. For miles, ditches, wooden stakes, and deadly traps sealed the city in. The defenders starved, watching helplessly as their allies outside were slaughtered trying to break through. No one had ever seen such a strategy before. It wasn't just a siege, it was a cage. Alesia fell not because Caesar's men fought harder, but because his genius left his enemies with no way out and no hope left to cling to. From that day on, the name Caesar became synonymous with inevitability. The siege of Jerusalem was one of Rome's most brutal campaigns. The city was fortified, its defenders fanatical, and its people desperate. But Rome had time, discipline, and unrelenting machinery of war. They encircled the city, cut off every supply line, and starved it into submission. The once great city was reduced to chaos, its streets filled with hunger and despair. When the final assault came, Roman siege engines smashed through the walls like they were paper. Fires raged across the city, temples and homes alike consumed in the inferno. The defenders fought with unmatched ferocity, but Rome's war machine ground them down until resistance was meaningless. By the end, Jerusalem was not merely conquered. It was annihilated, a grim warning to every other city that dared defy the empire. Masada stood high above the desert, a fortress the defenders believed could never be taken. But Rome did not believe in impossible tasks. For months, Roman engineers and soldiers hauled timber and stone under the blistering sun, building a massive ramp up the mountainside. Slowly, impossibly, the ramp rose until it touched the fortress walls. To the defenders, it must have felt like watching an avalanche in slow motion, unstoppable and merciless. By the time the ramp was complete, resistance had turned to resignation. When the Romans finally breached Masada, they found only silence. The defenders had chosen death over capture. Even then, Rome's lesson was clear. There was nowhere high enough, nowhere remote enough to escape their reach. Behind every Roman victory was an army of engineers. These men weren't warriors in the traditional sense, but their creations were deadlier than any sword. With wood, iron, and sheer ingenuity, they built machines that crushed walls, leveled gates, and terrorized entire cities. They designed bridges in days, siege towers in weeks, and ramps in months, turning impossible assaults into inevitable victories. Mathematics, architecture, and craftsmanship became weapons in their hands. Every bolt fired and every wall breached was a testament to their brilliance. Without Roman engineers, the legions were just soldiers. With them, they were an unstoppable force of nature. A siege wasn't just a battle. It was a test of endurance, and logistics was the hidden weapon that made Rome unstoppable. An army of tens of thousands required food, water, timber, and iron. Roman supply lines stretched for miles, carrying grain, tools, and siege materials. Ox-drawn carts brought timber from distant forests, while blacksmiths worked day and night forging replacement parts for their war machines. Even sanitation and camp organization were meticulously planned to prevent disease from crippling the army. This relentless efficiency allowed Rome to keep fighting long after their enemies would have starved or fallen apart. Rome didn't just bring soldiers to a siege, they brought an entire machine of war, built to last until the enemy finally broke. Rome's mastery of siege warfare didn't end on land. When cities resisted from the sea, Rome brought the siege to the waves. Their ships became floating fortresses equipped with ballistas, catapults, and even boarding towers. They rammed enemy vessels with iron-shod prows and unleashed storms of fire arrows upon coastal defenses. At Syracuse, they faced the brilliant defenses of Archimedes himself, but Rome adapted, blockading and starving the city until it fell. No matter how the enemy fortified their ports or relied on their navies, Rome found a way to turn the sea into another battlefield. If a city could be reached, it could be besieged. The destruction of Carthage was siege warfare at its most relentless. Rome didn't simply want to conquer their greatest rival. They wanted to erase them from history. For 3 long years, the city endured bombardment, starvation, and brutal assaults. But the Romans never wavered. They tightened their grip until Carthage could no longer breathe. When the final assault came, Roman soldiers stormed the streets in a tidal wave of steel and fire. The city was burned to the ground, its survivors sold into slavery, and its lands cursed with salt. Carthage wasn't just defeated, it was obliterated. And with it, Rome announced to the world that no enemy would ever rise against them again. Rome's sieges were more than brute force. They were the art of methodical destruction. Encirclement cut cities off from allies. Starvation ground their defenders down until even the strongest warriors turned desperate. Siege towers and artillery wore away their walls, while sappers worked unseen beneath their feet. Every tactic was designed to complement the others, creating a trap with no escape. By the time the final assault began, most cities were already broken, their defenders starving, exhausted, and terrified. Rome didn't simply fight wars. They dismantled resistance one calculated step at a time until surrender was the only choice left. None of this would have been possible without Roman discipline. Siege warfare was grueling, often lasting months or even years. Soldiers had to build, dig, and haul heavy materials under enemy fire while maintaining perfect order. A single mistake, an improperly constructed ramp, or an unguarded supply line could spell disaster. But Rome's legions didn't falter. They worked with the same precision they fought with, building roads, raising walls, and enduring hardship without complaint. Their discipline was their greatest strength, the force that turned ordinary men into an unstoppable machine of conquest. When a city finally fell, mercy was rare. Roman soldiers poured through the gates, looting treasures and enslaving survivors. Entire populations were uprooted, their homes destroyed, and their names erased from history. For Rome, a conquered city was not just a prize, it was a warning to others. Those who resisted suffered the fate of Carthage, Jerusalem, and countless others. But this brutality was also why so many cities surrendered without a fight. To defy Rome was to gamble with everything, and almost no one won that gamble. Rome's siege tactics changed the world. Their machines inspired medieval trebuchets. Their encirclements became the blueprint for future warfare, and their discipline became the standard for every army that followed. Long after the empire fell, their methods lived on in every fortress stormed, every wall breached, and every city that chose surrender over annihilation. Rome didn't just conquer, they wrote the manual for how to do it. Every wall they faced fell. Every city they challenged burned. Rome's siege warfare was not just a weapon of conquest, it was a force of nature. Their enemies didn't just fight Rome, they fought inevitability itself. And in the end, inevitability always won. If you think this was brutal, you haven't seen anything yet. Rome's war machine had even darker secrets, tactics that pushed the boundaries of cruelty and genius. Subscribe, and together, we'll uncover how an empire ruled the world one shattered wall at a time.